Hey there, it's Robert Ohado, intuitive and also astrologer. Welcome to this brand new session. We're going to be talking about Saturn retrograde in Pisces. Now, one of the things I always say in terms of how I work with astrology is that astrology is what we live. It is something that we often consider to be constellations in the sky and planets moving around and retrograding and moving around through our solar system as a living energy pattern that astrologers then use to understand the synchronistic dynamics of life here and co-creation here. All true. But that's all everything I just said is what we also live. So true to Saturn, this particular series is going to, or this session is going to be a bit serious. There's going to be some serious aspects to it because I don't need to tell you, right, that we are living in very challenging times. I know you're feeling it. I'm feeling it. I mean, here in the Northern Hemisphere, we continue to experience the devastating effects of climate change with heat waves, heat domes, wildfires, and then in other parts of my country, there's flooding. The whole entire world continues to warm, and we feel that. How can you not feel that atmosphere? Additionally, worldwide, we have wars. We have Ukraine and Russia, which has been going on for quite some time now, and then the horrific attack from Hamas on Israel, and then the counterattack, which was equally as horrific, I believe, on Gaza and the leveling of Gaza and all the people now starved. We have that. We've got something that's never talked about in the news, which is really another genocide happening in the Sudan with this Rapid Support Forces militia, which is like an upgraded version of the Janjaweed. Here's what I want you to, as we come into this is what I want you to get from what I just said. You're feeling that. If we're going to talk about being empathic, psychic, capable of feeling more than just ourselves, I think it's easy to lose focus that whatever is in the psychic atmosphere is connecting to us. So little sidebar to Saturn and Pisces, Pisces being about mystical consciousness, meaning we're all one. We breathe one atmosphere. We live on one earth. And here's this Saturn cycle, which actually began in March of 2023. And here we are in Saturn's second retrograde. It's already retrograded once. It did it last year. I didn't cover it publicly, but I did a whole massive series on it. And here we are in the midst of its second retrograde, which I actually feel is the most important and intense retrograde of them all. And I'm going to explain why. So I want you to locate yourself in everything I just said. And if you're in the United States, of course, we're in an election cycle that is absolutely toxic. The political tribalism is off the charts. We have Americans thinking of each other as the enemy. It's wow. Political parties are at war with each other, political wars within political parties. I mean, we ain't making this up. And astrology is what we live. So take a moment, and there's going to be light. This whole thing is about light. So bear with me, but we've got to get to the light, we've got to understand the dark in the room. And then how to get the light to it. The dark in your life and how to get the light to it. And that is what the Saturn cycle is about. Saturn is the school of hard knocks, taskmaster, teacher, karmic teacher. And within Pisces, it is about, all right, we have to start to understand the laws of mystical light, Pisces, but through Saturn's archetype, Saturn's energy. And this is so crucial because this particular cycle is an absolute setup for what is to come next as Pluto continues its journey in Aquarius and intensifies, as we continue a journey into the age of Aquarius, which is the overarching dominant meta pattern at play here. So I don't have time to go into all of that because I have before another series, but I want you to understand the organicity of all the cycles working in tandem like a symphony. And these cycles, really, if we get honest, let's look at it from a different lens. These are not really our cycles per se. They are. It's both and coming here. But if we were to step back and look at ourselves as souls, very Piscean to do, and go, okay, we are on Earth, right? As we've often heard, spiritual beings having a physical experience on Earth. Okay, what did you just say? You just said that your soul incarnated into a matrix of energy and co-creative cycles that astrology maps brilliantly to learn lessons, to grow, to expand its consciousness. Fill in all of the blanks for yourself. Whatever meaning for you there is in what I just said. But track with me because we're not done with this thread. That means there were already creative cycles, archetypal cycles, energetic cycles, managing reality here, co-creating reality here before any of us were born. We just stepped into them. So really, astrology is Gaia's astrology. It is the astrology of Gaia. It is understanding the creative forces that move through Gaia's psyche, Gaia's creative matrix, as Gaia is situated within the solar system in a certain way, in an orientation to constellations, in an orientation to the sun and the moon, in an orientation to creative laws. And we're in the school. And what's also equally as fascinating is that's fate. That's bigger than you and I, just like the weather. I can't decide it's not Saturn retrograde in Pisces any more than you can. It's an energetic dynamic that the ancients mapped brilliantly, and it's been evolved up until now, and I'm evolving it further, other astrologers maybe as well, into an era of how do we understand all of that in context to this new reality that you and I are co-creators. And we have to go co, right? There's a co. Gaia's a co. You might want to open up a great, thriving business in Houston. But then guess what? A hurricane comes in and wipes the whole building off the map. That's a co in the co-creation. And I'm going to have a bit of a Saturn tone. I can't help it because it's just what happens when I speak through Saturn and Saturn cycles. But there is a need now to understand the co in co-creation, but from a Piscean vantage point. And a lot of astrologers have had trouble trying to meld together using more traditional understandings of Saturn and Pisces as separate energies. Because Saturn wants structure. Saturn wants things to last. Saturn wants permanence. Very true. And Pisces wants dissolution. Pisces wants boundarylessness. Yeah, there's some truth to that too. So then, all right, well, what does Saturn in Pisces mean? What kind of energy does that activate? Well, you're living in it right now. And I'm going to show you exactly how you're living in it. It is in your experience. It's in my experience. And whenever there's a Saturn cycle, the cycle is like, okay, here's the deal. There's a new classroom. This one is a Piscean one, but Saturn is still the teacher. We've just gone into a Piscean understanding of Saturn's laws, what Saturn's about. And now we must mature, a Saturn word, into a different way to work with Pisces. I'm going to call this mystical maturity. That this cycle that's hit us generally without the retrograde, I'm going to get to the retrograde, is about becoming a mystically mature adult. Another Saturn word. So what does that mean? What does that mean in the next 2 years and the overall 2.5 years of Saturn being in Pisces? What does it mean to become a mystically mature adult? That is the question you and I should be living in through the whole cycle with curiosity and an openness to mature. And to mature means what? We're going to probably have to look at our immaturity to understand I'm not really adulting over here in this area of my life. And in this area, it happens to be a Piscean area. It's going to include, mystical and spiritual ideas, things that are all in the realm of One might say metaphysics, the supernatural, co-creation, manifestation, spirituality. Yeah. Where do we need to grow up here? And when we get into a retrograde with any planet, but it's just about Saturn, right? That planet's retrograde is like, okay, the last months that I have been setting up my retrograde zone, we're going to get into exact dates. I have been constellating the lessons for you, says Saturn in Pisces. Then on June 29th, I stationed retrograde and class was damn well in session. So, hey, we all have free will, learn the lessons or don't, but here's what I need you to know as Saturn, is that there's always karma for that. No one's opted out of karma. That is one of Saturn's co-teachers, if you will, and all of our teacher in this life. Hey, choice and action equal consequence. Grow up or don't. Okay, what happens if I don't? What happens if I stay immature? What happens if I stay in an identity and lock even further into my shadow with it and refuse to grow up, refuse to face, quote unquote, another Saturn word, reality? Oh, by the way, what is reality? These are all activated and on the table right now, are they not? I mean, take a look at the heaviness of the psychic energy right now and where it's coming from. You know, a lot of times, and just as a little advice, a little practice, we will feel like crap, right? Depressed, like, what's so great about this life? It's 105 out. Am I ever going to have like some things I really long for in my life come to fruition? Is that possible? Should I even get out of bed today? Because you know what? I'm probably just going to wake up to getting an alert on my phone or somewhere out there in the public about another bad news headline. I'm going to stay in bed. I mean, if you've been feeling this way, I've felt this way off and on. Sure. Heavy. It's heavy. There's a heaviness. This is Saturn. And I think it's important to realize that the heaviness you might be feeling is coming from sources you may not even be aware of. Part of the Saturn retrograde is to wake up to your empathic nature and understand your empathic system better and understand energetics better. Because Saturn is about boundaries. How about some mystical boundaries for yourself? What would those look like? We're going to get into some of that. What does it take to actually have that? Well, first, open up to, hey, this bad vibe that I'm feeling today might have just wafted in from the Sudan or from the latest bombing in Ukraine or the latest bombing in Gaza or the latest. And we're left in a lot of central questions within the Saturn classroom. Why does humanity still co-create reality through war? Why are we still doing this? For example, why are we getting so tribal? We stopped seeing each other as human beings, that stop seeing each other as having equal value. That's a mystical question. There's a lot here and it's heavy. You know, if you're not really opening yourself up to, hey, I might be feeling really shitty because, wow, that wildfire just burned up countless animals. And what's hitting my system is the suffering they went through before they burned up. And while we're in our Democrat or Republican egos, are we thinking about that? Are you thinking about that? Are you thinking about the suffering that is outside of your system, but yet part of your system because you're part of everything? A mystically mature adult would go, all right, wildfires, no matter where they happen, matter because I'm connected through the earth grid, life grid, biosphere to everything here. So I give a damn if that deer or that elk or that mountain lion is burning up right now, or the koala bear in Australia. We are in unprecedented times, and unprecedented times like this require unprecedented empowerment. And that's what Saturn in Pisces and this second Saturn retrograde in Pisces is saying to all of us. You need new metrics of empowerment, and they need to be mystically based. Now, you might hear that and something zings you and you go, I don't know what that means, but I know he's right. I feel it in my soul. I need mystical metrics of empowerment. I need a new relationship to grace, to light, to kindness, to compassion, and not one that makes me a doormat or codependent or not have boundaries or not stand up and draw a sword if necessary to defend what I do value. I need some new way to be. And this retrograde is saying that already. And last year's got us in the mix as well. So I don't know about you, but for me, there's just days where I'm like, you know what? I know there's this truth, right? That I was born for this time. We were born for this time, but what the F? Really? Because I think I'm about ready to check out of Earth School for just a little bit, Netflix and chill, and check back in when all this stuff just finds its own little solutions and figures itself out so I can start to go for goals that I have. We're in a time now where every goal you make, you have to consider whether the environment, literally climate, perhaps, will support you even having that goal. Building that dream home somewhere where there won't be water in 5 years, or there'll be too much water. This is, back when I was doing intuitive readings full time, things I saw as soon as 2011 with clients wanting to do investments in different real estate in different parts of the world. And I could sense and see, don't do it. If you do, get out, get in and get out, because that area is not going to be habitable or have water or be taken out after hurricane. And so if you're feeling this way, if anything I said has you going, oh my gosh, truth bombs, these are truths that hurt. And I can't even say so good yet because they just, dark, heavy, bleh. Yeah, Robert, let's Netflix and chill. Do you got some wine? Yes, I do. Come on over. I get it. No, I do. But here's the deal. We really were born for this time. You and I made a soul agreement to be here and to be here on this timeline, knowing that the karmic dominoes, the karmic momentum was set up to bring us to this time. We got a preview before we came here. And we're like, hell yeah, get me down there. I'm going to be a lighthouse. I'm going to be a light bearer. And your angels are like, okay, Saturn is going to go into Pisces for 2.5 years-ish. And that's when you're going to really learn in the most grounded and holistic of ways what that actually means, what it really means to be a light worker. Because here's the deal. Light workers are sent where? Where it's dark. Because that's where they're needed. And so here we are. Welcome. Now, when we look at this chaos, what can we do? I mean, that's the question I ask every damn day. What can I do? Where am I called? What's my calling in this? And I would offer a mystically mature adult's going to check in with that question, live in that question as well. And that, that should be something you write on your mirror. And we will all have perhaps different answers because we all have different graces, skills, gifts, but we're all needed. So what I can tell you after working with astrology for 30 years, I'm almost 52 years old right now, started when I was 19, true story, is that what I have found guide me, perhaps better than anything, as an intuitive tool that I found when I was 19 and immediately fell in love with, is just that. It's astrology. Now, the astrology I'm going to bring forward here may not be the astrology that you know or are used to, or you may not, you may follow other astrologers that just don't really speak this way, don't get into the grit. That's not who I am. And you may find that this isn't an astrology you like and perhaps isn't for you. I'm totally fine with that. Because if we're not going to use these intuitive tools like astrology to better navigate as co-creators conscious choice, empowered holistic actions, empowerment, what are we doing? What are they for? Are they serving the wounded human ego, or are they serving the soul and the soul agreements? And I would just say the astrology I'm going to offer, what it will do for you, it's going to help you locate your power and powerlessness, because we do have both. It's going to help you get to balance. It's going to help you make mystical pivots, which are fabulous. It's also going to help you really connect to your core purpose as a co-creator. I have done over 10,000 readings whilst I was active. I've retired 7 years ago and learned so much about us through using the tool of astrology. And as much as I love it, I'm just going to tell you right now, don't make it a false god either. It's a tool. But damn it, if I haven't seen astrological cycles and their timing work like a freaking clock. I'm an empiricist. I have a background in clinical psychology. I like things that have a little measurability, some stats to them. And astrology gave me that. And I watched it. I didn't believe in it because it was cool and new age or whatever. I started to use it and see if it worked. And damn it, it works. So at this time, what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to take you into this, nearly 5 month. It's about 4.5 months, really. Saturn retrograde in Pisces. And I'm going to show you what this cycle wants you to learn. I'm going to speak as if it's a teacher, because truly I sense that is exactly what it is. So it's going to want you to learn something like how to move within the chaos of our fast changing world as an emotionally balanced empath with robust psychic boundaries and an open intuitive heart. Which, doesn't that sound amazing? Yes, please. It's going to teach you things like how to work with the current world challenges, life events, both for you personally and all of us, right? As a high-level alchemist. And an alchemist that at this level has access to what I'm going to call is mystical light. And I'm not talking about woo-woo fantasy light here. I am talking about, as a technician, a way to work with light that maybe you've never considered. I think that this is a classroom, as we sit here in this retrograde with Saturn in Pisces, where we have to, come to know what mystical light is, and then know also that, hey, being capable of channeling that, it's going to take that I engage some Saturn and Pisces lessons that this retrograde is bringing front and center, and I'm going to have to mystically grow up. I'm going to have to let go of one of the shadow sides of Pisces, which is illusion and fantasy, and understand what is truly reality. How do we come to know and understand reality collectively, individually? I also think that this classroom is going to offer an understanding for you around karma. That Saturn, as a karmic teacher, the real head of the karmic department, is itself a karmic force that always gives you what you earn. Saturn doesn't cheat you. It's not a trickster god. It's not a trickster archetype. It's not a trickster energy. But you're going to experience out of what you learn, especially in this Piscean classroom, what you're willing to actually put in as effort to learn. And out of that's going to come, empowerment, Miracles in your life that you never thought possible. And the key is thought. We've got to put the mind in its appropriate place. That's something a mystically mature adult does. The mystically mature adult goes, the mind has very little power. It's got power, but it's monkey mind, says the Buddhist. It's all over the place. So if it's not the mind where the power is, which a lot of spirituality and self-help teaches, and I disagree a lot of the time, depending on their approach, then what has the power? Well, Saturn in Pisces is, I got you. Come on, get in this classroom. So question now becomes, are you in? Are you willing to attend Saturn's School of Higher Learning? That's on offer right now through this Saturn in Pisces cycle, but most notably this 5-ish month Saturn retrograde in Pisces. Now, I know you just said, hell yeah. So you're in good company. You're like, bring it. Yeah, let's do it. School of Hard Knocks. I love it. Okay, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to stick around. We have a lot to get into. Buckle in. And if you can, I would encourage you bring a copy or get a copy of your birth chart, because I'm going to show you. That's why I was a little late to the live here, because it's always the second camera that gives me grief. God's willing, this will work out. But I'm going to show you how to find this current retrograde in the Saturn cycle overall in your birth chart, and kind of how to look at your birth chart and look at what we call a transit in astrology, as a way to get more information around your lessons, what Saturn in Pisces is issuing to you as your learning. There can be some hints there. I can't go too deep, but I can point you in the right direction. That's always fun for me to do. So if you have a copy of your birth chart, get it out. We're going to take a little intro break here, just like 20 seconds. But here's what I want you to know. We are in a massive energy shift. And when Saturn was getting ready to station retrograde, think about late June. Just go back on your timeline to that last week, 2 weeks of June. Oof. Now, I could point to so many things in the news headlines, in politics, in world events, in climate that mirror everything I'm saying, because it's what we live. But I also, at the same time, want you to make real personal connections to this information. I could never, to be sure, cover every nuance and aspect of the Saturn in Pisces cycle and Saturn retrograde in Pisces cycle. It would be impossible. And most notably, we're all going to be, and this is important, so listen up, in different levels of consciousness and awareness, which then would mean, hey, some people are going to be in the advanced alchemical studies of this cycle, and some aren't, because that's not where their consciousness is. Some are going to use astrology as something that just tells them what's going to happen, instead of, hey, I'm going to the classroom that tells me how I can happen to life, not how it's going to happen to me. And my astrology sits in between that. Yes, there's fate. Life will happen. There's karmic forces that will roll through our lives, like cosmic energetic weather. And we get to happen in that right back to the cycle itself. That's what co-creation's about. Should we go against the weather? No. Don't mistake me. Rather, how can you harness it? How could you create, in this instance, Piscean technology that was structured with Saturn's structure in your interior first, so that it can start playing a role outside of you? That, in essence, is this cycle. And the retrograde brings up your blind sides, our blind sides, and says, hey, all right, I've set up the lessons. Let's get into the blind sides. Let's get into the learning, the awakening. But I'm going to speak at a level that I'm going to assume, because you found this video, is meant for you. It's not meant for someone else that just wants astrology that tells them, who they're compatible with and when the opportune times are for this and that. And that there's some use in that. I don't find a lot of it to be useful per se, because I'm more interested in, hey, how do we co-create up in this joint? Yeah, I want that structure. It's very wise to seek the archetypal structure of the cycles, the energies, the timing, 100%. But also, what's my opportunity in the classroom of that cycle to grow, to expand, to level up, to love more, feel more, and have boundaries? Who knew? So I pretty much can guarantee you this. I'm going to offer you stuff I maybe already have that you've never heard through an astrologer before. And we're going to dive right into Pisces and get this party started. And what I would say is dive in, great metaphor, right? Pisces, the ocean. But we're really diving into the mystical heart of the matter. Mystical heart, Pisces, matter, Saturn. So, but I'll leave you just for now with that keyword, heart. Stay with me, coming right back. Okay, you ready to do this? Because here's what's up. Saturn Retrograde in Pisces school is now in session. All right. I want you to map yourself a little more. So I want you to consider whether currently, lately, maybe like since the beginning of 2024, maybe your whole life, what I'm going to say is accurate for you. But as I go through a little self-evaluation here, so that you can kind of locate yourself in your truth, in your experience, I want you to consider how long you've been feeling certain ways or how long something's been going on and where you can identify what I'm about ready to help you look at in your life. So if you've been having ongoing challenges with empathic and emotional overwhelm and overload, is that true for you? Has that been true for you lately? Oh my God. I mean, can we all just give each other a hug? Yes, right? And I mentioned in the beginning that a lot of that is coming from sources you might not be considering. I bring that up now because everything I'm going to mention here is part of the lessons of Saturn in Pisces, Saturn retrograde in Pisces, that I'm going to cover in the time we have. Have you been feeling an energetic heaviness hanging in the collective atmosphere? And it's a heaviness that kind of just brings this sense of doom to the world, to like, what's going to happen in this world? Are we going to make it? You know, and what's next? So in our country, it's like, what's next for Americans? Are we going to survive this political tumult? Are we going to get through? We don't even know who really at this point, who the Democratic, candidate is at this stage. And we're in such, and one just, the Republican one almost just got assassinated. I mean, it's something. And would you believe I predicted a lot of this in my astrological overview for 2024? And I got students like, Robert said this would happen. Yep. So are you feeling anxiety and uncertainty, not sure what's real, what's next, or what's even possible for your life's potential within all this chaos? Okay. I think you're right where you're supposed to be. I know it sucks. I feel you. Do you feel like everything is taking like 10 times the effort to get done? And it's like every day you end the day in burnout, like, oh my God, whether that's from the heat or the effort or both, or whatever, you might just be picking up on the people that lost their home in a tornado. And now what are they going to do? I mean, people are being hit all over this planet by things that we're all feeling. If you're empathic or a highly sensitive person or an quote unquote empath, baby doll, this is all up in it. And Pisces is an archetype in astrology. I'll use this word, rules that kind of realm of the psychic, energetic, frequency realm. So Saturn's here like, okay, you got to start to work with this energetic holism that's part of the psychic field of the earth and of humanity and all beings on this planet. You got to work with it differently, or it's going to crush and collapse you. That's why you got to become a mystically mature adult. You got to adult up with this stuff and start to look at maybe other things you've studied that were really more about staying immature, staying in fantasy versus, hey, hardcore, man, let's get down to how am I going to keep my psychic hygiene tight up in this joint with this crap? And some of it, by crap, I mean, people engineering psychic viruses and, if you will, psychic warfare and psychic triggering so that you keep watching the news and watching every headline and wondering, I better stay watching and glued to the TV because who knows, the world can end and I better know about it. Okay. Yeah. What's your psychic hygiene like? Maybe let's not watch the news. Maybe let's just read headlines on your phone if you want to stay informed. Maybe let's just check in with what news sources you access for news. And is that really news? A lot of what passes for news today, in my opinion, it ain't news. It's talking heads and, spinning us up and triggering us to stay glued to whatever they're saying in the TV. So we need a new maturity to handle that, right? We got to start going, wait a minute, I'm taking care of my inner child a little differently. It's a sensitive child, and I don't need all the speculation and what's going to happen is going to happen. Now, when do we vote? And who the hell am I voting for? Who's available? Have you decided yet? So if you feel like you are really, that said, struggling every day with all the headlines, well, there's being informed and being infected, and a mystically mature adult's going to know the difference. And Saturn's here to help. Hey, I need you to understand when you're infected versus informed. A mystically mature adult should understand the karmic dynamics of life in the world, especially if they live in a democracy where their vote carries karma. And so I want you to be informed, says Saturn, but you're infected. There's political think tanks trying to figure out how to better infect you. You're not thinking for yourself, feeling for yourself. Your psychic nervous system has completely been hijacked. And you can't figure out why you cannot put your phone down and stop looking at the newsfeed or the headline or the latest, exchanges on Threads or X or, I'm literally probably spilling out my own personal challenges right now, but seriously, right? So if you're seriously struggling with all these heartbreaking world events that I've already mentioned, a lot of them that seem to be tearing our shared humanity apart, you are in the right classroom. So what I want to share with you is the most important thing that I would say you do need to do to get through this time. And if I would sum it up right now, it's that you got to mystically grow up. Saturn and Pisces, let me give you a little bit of what it is. And then I'm going to go into Saturn for a minute, talk about what Saturn actually is, give you a little education on that for about 5 minutes. And I'm going to go into Pisces as an archetype, talk about that, and upgrade some new understanding around Pisces. And then we're going to bring them back together and keep rolling and right into the retrograde. But what I want you to understand is this is about lessons in mystical maturity, this whole entire cycle. And what yours are, what ours are, and what it means to be a mystically mature adult now. Saturn as an archetype is the no bullshit archetype. It is the karmic bottom line archetype. It is bottom line yourself on your own bullshit archetype. And it does it through, speaking of karma, first giving you a very, almost oftentimes 2x4 reality check with your own karma or the karma you're participating in or karmic factors of life in the world. So I'll riff here. You're learning some things in spirituality, and maybe some of it is, hey, the key to abundance and everything is this vision board, and put things up on it. And if you really believe in it, and if you really feel it, and if you really, then you'll manifest it. And Saturn goes, oh, really? You think that's how the laws of manifestation and attraction and magnetics work here? Really? Well, here's the deal. You just put up on that vision board that you want to get married to a soulmate, twin flame, fill in the blank. But here's the real challenge for you. You have patterns in you that push people away, or patterns in you that have magnetics to draw in narcissists and vampires, because your esteem system runs on people pleasing. So that vision board has no power at all. You're in fantasy. That's a Saturn in Pisces mystically mature look at something like that, for example. Your patterns are far more powerful than any imagery on a vision board. And in fact, that vision board could send you right into a dark night of your unrequited lover or your codependent or your people pleaser, so that you neutralize that pattern. And then, yeah, maybe now you can welcome in magnetics that bring a reciprocal, present, mature, loving, giving partner. But you think you go and bypass that with a vision board? Think again. So here's my Saturn tone. And that's just an example of the vibe of this cycle, the vibe. And anytime we get instruction, intuitive instruction to see holism, it's instruction that says, pull back to mystical eyes. You're in too much of a myopic view with your human ego and your wounded side of the human ego that's trying to get to enough. It's distorting and filtering out what you can and can't see. So pull back. And if you won't pull back, well, I'm going to knock you back, says Saturn. And that will come through a karmic and usually a negative karmic consequence. So I'm going to start putting this on timelines for the retrograde and everything, but I'm laying the foundations of the energies, how the alchemy works, how Saturn works. And then we'll get deeper into Pisces as we go here. But this is my intention, is to gift you with, in as much time as I can, and then give you an opportunity for access to something else that if you want to go further, you can. What happens to be the sponsor of this video. We'll get there. But I want you to consider that this cycle is about supporting your well-being, your balance, your emotional empathic balance, your boundaries, into intuitive and healthy boundaries, and your purpose. So, as I said before, we live in unprecedented times. We need unprecedented empowerment. We need new approaches to empowerment that are mystically mature. As I say that, I want you to just take a minute and, hey, there's a Saturn tone, and Saturn, all the no BS and it is what it is and bottom lining and all that kind of stuff. That really is Saturn. But that's not to say that we still don't have compassion and we still don't have love for ourselves. Rather, it's the most loving thing I can do for myself is tell myself hard karmic truths. The most loving thing I can do for myself is look at the hard karmic truths of life right now. And then let's get mystical. It's soul prayer to the light. What's my role in alchemy here within what the karma is doing? And then maybe look back on our timeline and go, ooh, I kind of helped build some of this momentum, didn't I? Because you know what? I've always driven a gas guzzling car. And hey, me too. I've always used plastic. Me too. But guess what? Fish are barely able to survive in parts of the ocean now because there's too much plastic. Birds, all sorts of animals now are dying. And that's on our karma. We use plastic. And that isn't to shame or blame. This is what I'm setting up here. This is actually rather to go, wait a minute, this is just what's true. When they cut up on those birds, there's plastic in their belly. Or those fish, there's plastic in their belly. We now have microplastics in our bodies, as they're finding. And it's worldwide. That's karma. Use plastic the way we do. Well, it ends up eventually in your body. Whoa. Okay. Now what? And I don't have all the answers here. This is the point. We each have to go, now what? Where's my role here? Should I start using more glass? Heaven goes, yeah. Okay, cool. I literally just made the shift myself to using more glass. And we do what we can. Should I buy a hybrid car? If that's in my budget? Yeah. Okay, done. Instead of debating reality, and we spent all these years debating, is the planet warming? Yeah. It's 10 degrees warmer here where I live in the mountains of Colorado than it's supposed to be. I don't know about where you are. Yeah, so I think we can safely assume now the planet's warming, right? Saturn truths are self-evident in our experience. And then this cycle says, what in you won't look at that and why? Is it your political tribal identities? Is it your shame? I can't see that. It'll make me feel like I'm a bad person that I use plastic. What is it? And to see that clearly, let me offer you an archetype, if you will, that is my favorite. As an intuitive, it has been how I've been so damn accurate. And that's the technician. Just see things as a karmic technician. Remove the stories, remove the charges and triggers, remove the politics, just see the choice, action, and consequences of things. Just start there. I have to be willing to see. Because what Saturn retrogrades, as I said, do is they go, hey, this is what you're not seeing. Here's your blind side. Oh, okay. And I'll use a contemporary example, and I'm going to use it Saturn style, and I'm not making, as I do this, I'm not siding with any opinion, okay? And this is a test to see if you can be neutral and technical with me. But it would appear that the Democratic Party, for example, in my country, was insulating Biden from the public for quite some time, so we may not see his advanced age, and then he does a debate with Trump, where he's literally blanking, forgetting words, incoherent, and staring off. This is videotaped. We saw this, right? I did. So, okay. Do we want to actually tell the truth about this or not? And that's the debate the Democrats are having now. Are we going to tell the truth? And everyone's going to slant and go in their own way. And what's the karma for that? These are intuitive questions to live in. And did this all not kick in with Saturn going retrograde? Yes, it did. It's called synchronicity. This aspect of Joe Biden and his fitness for candidacy, etc. And I saw what I saw. Did you see that? Because that's what I saw. It wasn't a bad night. That's cognitive decline. I have a background in some of this. That's cognitive decline. And does he have a problem with it? I don't know. It appears maybe. We can have some nuance there, but my point is, what's the karma for not actually telling the truth and hiding things away? It's going to come out. It's going to eventually hit the ground. These are the co-creative laws of life here. Karma is one of the biggest ones. You don't like the consequence? You can spin and reorient and psychologically reorient perception to seem like you didn't see what you saw, and now shift things like, let's go to the other side. Like, there wasn't really an insurrection on the Capitol of the United States of America. Yes, there was. A policeman died and other people were severely injured, and they were breaking windows and going in there and trying to hang a vice president. It's on film. Oh, it's just a bunch of tourists. Now, hang with me if you're getting triggered. Good. This is how we grow. We don't grow from easy peasy echo chambers. We grow from hard truth. And you can tune me out. You can switch me off now. That doesn't matter. Karma will do karma. Karma doesn't care what you do. Karma is karma. It is a law that doesn't care about your political identities or political party, or it doesn't care about your opinion. So whether you have an opinion, and you call it an opinion on climate change, and whether it's warming or it's just summer, which I keep people keep saying, scientists are in the realm of karmic studies, right? They look at consequence and what things do in laboratories. So, or measurements and how that correlates with CO2 in the air and all this stuff, right? We need to be more like them in terms of Saturn and Saturn's teaching here. So I'm bringing this up to intentionally rile you, hopefully a little, not to be provocative per se, just for that sake, but rather a good teacher should get you out of your seat going, you're pressing me out into some things I don't want to really look at, Robert. Good. Get into the practice of looking at things you don't want to, says Saturn. And says me as a teacher. Intuition, clear intuition, clairvoyance, is seeing clearly what is at its core, without story, without political identity, without an identity that will distort or filter. It's just seeing through into a system of something and understanding its karmic factors. That's what every reading I've ever done has been. I've often said I'm a technician of the human psyche because I can see you as a system that way. Your patterns, the karmic factors, what your trauma's done, how it has adapted, in my language, downloaded archetypes into your system to manage your trauma, your safety, security, esteem, and survival. So, having said that, getting you ready, getting you, ready for Saturn school. And here's the thing. This is the nature of karma too. You can walk out of the karma school, but the 2x4 is still coming with. It's not, you're not opted out just because you don't like hearing something. You're not entitled to outrun karmic forces. We're meant to learn from them. And if we can, then we get other options of healing, of mystical pivots, of bringing in miracles. Let me tell you something as an intuitive, a Saturn truth as an intuitive. Your intuition does not support you lying to yourself. Your intuition does not support you and your political party lying to yourself. Your intuition does not guide you to lie better. Your intuition does not deny karma. In fact, it plugs into the holism of the whole karmic grid of life and reports back to you information. So you now have a compass, a karmic compass of choice and consequence. And then it guides you from there. You want to be intuitive? Well, buckle in. It's a truth teller that has no concern for whatever wounded ego identities you got rolling. And if you've got wounded ego identities rolling, or tribalism so strong that the tribe actually distorts or filters perception for you, you will not get clear guidance. It is a technical truth. Saturn in Pisces is, at least in my classrooms, I'm teaching right now a course called Vertical Intuition, where I teach these things. That one pattern in you, one identity in you can actually distort clear intuition, and you won't even know that's what's happening until the karma hits you right in the ass. And then now you find yourself in the dark night of an identity because it will not allow guidance to reach you. So Saturn in Pisces, one of its lessons, do you block intuitive guidance from reaching you? How? Why? When? How's that working for you? You might not even know. But being open to the shadow is to be open to the reality you may not know. And that, hey, maybe I can know if I just stay curious. Yeah. So one of the mandates from Saturn and Pisces, get curious. Get curious about the holism of your questions, because your questions aren't just about you. My questions aren't just about me anymore. We're tipping into a new creative age where we now have to really factor in all is really one. It always was. There was always one world. But hey, in the year 1000 BC, they didn't know, because they couldn't go everywhere yet. Going across the ocean, well, are we going to fall off the flat earth? What's going to happen? Eventually, we evolve our consciousness. But we've always been one world. The difference now, says Saturn in Pisces, retrograde, start acting like it. Start acting like it's one world. Start choosing like it's one world. Every choice, everything you can possibly, not perfectly, but possibly bring in to your perception holistically. Start to see this. Now, I'm going to reference politics again as a teaching, not taken aside, but I will say this. Elections are won and lost by blind sides. Think about it. It's the blind side that the polls didn't see coming, that the strategists didn't see coming. Most of the time, elections are won and lost by blind sides. So while I sit here and watch, as an intuitive, watch Democrats fight amongst themselves as to whether Biden should resign or not, I'm thinking, you guys should actually come together and compare blind sides. And if you did that, got out of all the storytelling, there's a lot of storytelling, but actually came together and compared blind sides, then you'd get clear. Then you would know exactly the next best step. But one side thinks they don't have blind sides. The other thinks they don't have blind sides. And maybe another side out there. Oh, no, we all have blind sides. I have blind sides. But the difference between me and maybe someone else is I know I do. And being clear and being a mystically mature adult is, I have blind sides. What are they? And living in that question, because that question's a prayer. You just said to life, show me my blind sides. And synchronicity, just intentional synchronicity, I call it. You just activated it. So now it's going to start popping around you. And if you're not in some kind of presence with this, you're going to miss the signs. You're going to miss the synchronicities. And then until what? Until the 2x4 comes. And here we are, Saturn retrograde. Okay. Now, I want to outline for you what Saturn's like. I think I've been kind of doing that already, but add some new elements in. And then I want to talk to you about how Saturn retrogrades work through 3 phases and the energetics of them. And then we're going to look at this current retrograde and we're just going to keep going. So it's been a while. And just briefly here, because this is actually a live stream, I'd like to say hi to everybody. So hi, everybody. Welcome. And truly, I'm glad you're here. I think this is so timely. I was so excited when I finally got my energy together to do this. I had a very severe bike accident now 4 months ago. The Saturn retrograde setup phase, when it began, I had my bike accident. That was my 2x4, literally. So after surgery and some rehab and rest, I'm kind of back in the mix. And I'm just happy to be back in the mix. It feels really nice. And I just love connecting with all of you. So thank you for being here. I see YouTube. We got Facebook. We got Nancy Pell, Carolyn Yarbrough, Susan Crichton. I mean, I'm seeing some longtime students, Allison Waddle, Christine Palmer, Jill Gosling. Oh my gosh, Lulu, Gretchen Jensen, Sam, Denise Lowe. Wow. Joy Burns, Julie Farron. Oh my gosh, I could go on. Kate Zimmer. I'm going through my whole student roster. So much love for all of you. And if you're new to me, love to you too, equally. I'm so glad you're here. Hang tight, hang with me. I'm a very Saturn type teacher, as any longtime student will probably tell you. And that comes out of being and I don't mean this with ego, but just with clarity, a very clear intuitive, like having a very sharp skill. And to have that, in my experience, you have to really continually work on all the things I'm saying here. Am I seeing clearly what in me might be distorting information? Am I able to receive what I call vertical downloads clearly? Or does some part of me filter out? And I use color spectrums as a way to look at this. Violet, or the violet information, light as information, the violet information, the green information, because my perfectionist doesn't know what to do with that. And this is, if you understood yourself the way I've come to map us and see us after all these years, it's a phenomenal thing to go more technical into yourself. And ironically, it's the most beautiful part of it. The payoff is you become more loving with yourself. It's an interesting remove from emotion, but then welled up in mystical emotion, because you took yourself out of the wounded stories, the wounded identities, and all of their co-creative reactions or management of your life, which in some ways we needed. I don't know about you, but when I was 5, the adult child with 2 alcoholic parents looked pretty damn good. Now, when I got into my 30s, not so much. 40s, not so much. 50s, hell no. You know what I'm saying? So, but let's talk about Saturn. Saturn, to me, all the planets in astrology represent some creative force that's part of life here on Earth, and all have their role. And then we can say, and it's also accurate, that all the planets in astrology also represent some creative force in us. So Mercury would be your mind, for example. Venus would be your values, for example. Mars would be your will. And I'm giving very, one note examples here, because there's more to each of these planets, but Jupiter would be your intuition or capacity to see the bigger picture and get into symbolic philosophical perspectives, and dream and have goals and look past what is to what could be. We all have that. It's also connected to what Jung would call the sort of spiritual function of the psyche, where we seek meaning, we seek connection to something greater than ourselves. And then I have to now bring Neptune in when I say that. And then Saturn, what is Saturn? Saturn is the part of us that actually has everything to do with our human ego development. And I might be clear here, the human ego is wonderful. You need it. Making the ego blanket in a blanket way wrong is one of the worst imports we brought in from Eastern philosophy, and perhaps even misinterpreted. The ego is not your enemy. The wounded ego, not such a nice co-creator or creative companion. But the healthy human ego, yes, please. Saturn is the force in us that walks us through stages of ego development. And I'm going to show you something to map this out for you. So I'm going to say something real quickly here. I'll come back to it later, because this is the sponsor of this series, of this session. I have done a massive, and I do mean massive, deep dive into this cycle. And that's where a lot of these slides I'm going to share with you come from. And if you're interested, it's 50% off right now. I was like, I got to get this back out there and make it as cheap as possible, because I want all of you that are interested in going deeper to get this and rock out mystical maturity. Now, this is what it actually is. It's this program, Saturn in Pisces, 12 Lessons in Mystical Maturity. It's 50% off till July 31st, sponsor of this video. It takes you through 12 lessons that also mirror the 12 houses. So if you know where Saturn is in your birth chart, I'm going to hit the house for you in a very frickin' deep way. But what I want you to understand outside of this sponsorship promotion is that Saturn generally, and I'm going to bring a slide to show this, what its role is in our psyche is this. It's about us incarnating into the Earth's matrix of creation. First thing, first house, you get an ego name. Second thing, you realize you have a body. This is the second house journey. And then we start to develop some sense of worth and boundary. Third house, we start to learn what? How to communicate. And this matches the same exact stages of our human development, biopsychically, biopsychologically, yes, and even I would say biomystically once we get further along into the second Saturn return. But this also constitutes what is a Saturn journey, a Saturn return journey, which is about 28 to 29 years, depending. Fourth house is about where we start to understand ourselves through the ego of our family ancestry, our history, our family psyche, and those patterns. And then we come into the fifth house and we're like, oh, wait, there's this creative thing in me. And it's unique to my soul. And I've got to express this. I've got to extend this out. I got to shine this light somehow. And then we go into the sixth house here. That was the fifth. And it's about, okay, now I'm going into pre-puberty, puberty, something. My body's changing. I've got hormones going. Things are kicking in. I'm realizing my body is a system of health, of ritual, of routine, of habit. And I am, right? Seventh step is, hey, relationship to others. Now that I'm kind of getting centered in my body, now it's about developing who I am and identity in relationship to other people. And everything I'm saying is how Saturn develops us. This is what Saturn does. Now, I'm going to come out of that. You want the full lesson, it is in that series, but I want you to understand just for now, what does Saturn do? It takes something out of, let me use quantum physics for a minute, out of waveform, and then patterns it into particle. And it takes something out of soul and moves it to something within your human ego identity that can interface and co-create in this world. Without Saturn, you are not incarnate. There's nothing that gets to this density of experience that we call Earth life without Saturn. And as the ancients began to look out, the furthest they could see was Saturn, which is interesting because it also sort of states in the mass psyche of the ancients, I'm being general, that in synchronicity, the furthest they could see with their human eyes was Saturn, and they couldn't see past to Uranus, to Chiron, which didn't even get discovered till 1977, but they couldn't see past. They were more within the survival domain of human ego development for the most part. Of course, you had your oracles, your sages, your shamans, who could see past Saturn. But Saturn is the gatekeeper of identity. If you want anything to manifest into this life, like in a real way, not fantasy, what are you going to need? Hard work, discipline, time, consistency, stability. These are all Saturn aspects. So that's just really generally speaking how the archetype of Saturn functions as a dimensional gateway that has actually, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, I do in the series, but I want to offer this to you, that has a door. Okay. Now, from our side of looking at Saturn, we see the Earth side of the door. But there's another side of that door that's actually, I'm going to say, the waveform side. And check this out. Just ruminate on this out of curiosity. I always teach this because I think it's something worth mentioning for internal consideration. In quantum physics and all the quantum philosophy that's out there in spirituality and self-help, there's a lot of talk about infinite possibilities within the quantum field, because that's what apparently scientists have been able to begin to see. Infinite dimensional possibilities. Okay. And what does that mean to my Earth life, your Earth life here? Well, spirituality self-help decided to make it about, you can be anything you want to be. Can you? Can you be anything you want to be? Can I? Now let me bring Saturn. Saturn, can we be anything we want to be? No. You got a soul contract. You're in a body that's going to limit that. And you are part of time. Your body ages. That's going to determine what you can and can't become. Your, I don't know, intellectual prowess might be part of what you can and can't become. Your gender, your race, your ethnicity, your sexuality, your gender identity. There's a lot of things that go into who you are. But you decide you just can be anything you want to be. Is that really true? Your life experience tells you that's absolutely not completely the truth. Now, here's Saturn talking through me. Saturn's going to go, yeah, there are infinite possibilities in the quantum. So I want you to ask yourself this question, says Saturn. How is it then that out of all those infinite possibilities, only certain possibilities actually manifest? What is the determining factor of that? Now, I'm not so sure science has figured that out fully, but intuitively what I'd offer, archetypally what I would offer, is what determines that is, one, your soul contract, the karmic dynamics of the earth grid, what is and isn't possible here. Hey, you might like for the sun to rise in the east, or rather rise in the west and set in the east. Ain't happening, because that's not how the earth works with the sun here. You know, I mean, you might want 48 hours in a day. Well, it doesn't happen. That's not how it works here. There are implicit laws, Saturn laws. And, you know, he was a Titan in mythology. He was the offspring of Gaia. And that says a lot symbolically about Saturn's nature. And we are such an interesting species. We are bound to Saturn, bound to gravity, right? The law of gravity is working for you. It's working for me right now. But do you think you could become Superman? You can be anything you want to be. Can you just fly up in the air? Yeah, it's about being mature. And if I was going to use the skeptic archetype, it would be in this sense that the skeptic is not a believer or non-believer. The skeptic doesn't know. The shadow skeptic is just as polarized as the person who would say, I believe in everything. The skeptic goes, I don't know. And if it comes up in my experience as something that I then know, well, then I'll know. So do we have, says a skeptic, life after death? I don't know. I've never had an after death, near-death experience. I don't know anyone else who has. I don't have an intuitive sense of that being maybe something that can or that exists. I don't know. The shadow skeptic goes, no, absolutely not. The brain is all there is. And then you have the radical, you know, I'd say shadow optimist or shadow believer that's, well, yes, of course, everything, you know. Saturn sits as an arbiter of what we would call reality. But a reality that is based in both your internal relationship to what's outside of you and just what is objectively a thing outside of you that exists. So when we say we co-create reality, what does that exactly mean? What are you talking about? Your inner states? Sure. If you can work with that and master that, yeah, you can master some pretty, you know, dynamic, empowered ways to move in the world where, you know, there's chaos, but you're at peace because you're creating that peaceful state in yourself. Well, good on you. Does that mean there's something wrong with wanting to be in a rebellion? Absolutely not. Maybe that person's meant to be a rebel. Rebel's part of the co-creative journey here. And what I'm after here is I want you to understand Saturn is the most grounding, structured aspect of your human journey. And nothing comes into this realm without passing through Saturn's gate. And I could go deeper into why that's true and all that, but I have to move down a little bit more on my outline so we can get to some other things here. Once again, that is all in that big series I did. So now let's get into Pisces a little bit. Before I say that, one more thing about Saturn. As Saturn in human psychological, human biopsycho, spiritual development is the force that shapes us in many ways. It plays a role both outside of us through culture, family, and ancestry and society. And then our relationship, our Saturn relationship with that has to do with, that's an external authority. Have I internalized it? There's always this question in Saturn development of what external things have I internalized as authority that now rule my inner world? And then the flip side of maturing through Saturn as a human is, how do I get authentically strong enough to where the soul in me is now being put into my ego structures of identity, expressing out through them as a co-creator, regardless of society's opinion about that, thoughts about that, feelings about that, authority about that. So if you're someone like me who's part of the LGBTQ community, I'm gay, and you grow up and at 5, you know you're different. You don't know exactly why, but you know something's different about you. Then you start to get closer to puberty, and now you start to realize, I know what's different about me. I'm into dudes. And then I look to my Catholic upbringing, Catholic high school and grade school, and there's that outer authority going, yeah, now you're going to hell. That's not natural. How's that not natural? I didn't choose this. The only choice I got here is I can either be who I really am or not be what you think I should be. So I please your God. That now I'm starting to think isn't the God. So we all have this. And Saturn then is connected to the archetypal process of coming out with who you really are. Coming out's not just for gay people, it's for all of us. We all have to come out with something about ourselves that is unique to who we are, that is part of our soul. Now, I'm not saying at the soul level I'm gay. When I leave this personality and the psyche and all this behind, I'm not going to be gay. I chose this as a way to wake up to everything I'm teaching you right now about authenticity. And we will forever be caught through the Saturn dynamic of this internal creative force that's part of our destiny. It must be expressed and actualized. And that may not make people happy because it's new. It moves us into the unknown. It moves society into the unknown. It tears at the power structures and fabrics of power within society. This is no different for women and women's rights. The civil rights struggle. We've all got, however, some part of us that when we hit our first Saturn return around 28 years old, some aspect of us is saying, hey, it's time for you to make room for me in your identity and not give a shit about what these people think. It's time to differentiate away from your family line and its authority, maybe other things as well, to become more of who you were born to be. That is a Saturn issue. Do you have the inner strength, inner authority enough to, in compassion to, I'm going to say, not in spite of, but in compassion to the they out there that doesn't understand, you still become you. So as we look at this cycle, I want you to consider where in this retrograde, you're becoming aware that there's something soulful, mystical in me. And I'm going to get to a centerpiece for all of us, which is going to center around the heart. But there's something that's wanting now to come out. And what you know intuitively is that so-and-so may not like that. Maybe that so-and-so is your spouse, your children, your parents. Maybe it's your political party. Maybe fill in your blanks of what out there may not approve of what's in here and ready to be born. That is what Saturn does. It midwives the soul. The first cycle of it, I'll show this to you again, is all about simply to the best of what you're scheduled for and can pull off evolving into a healthy, solid ego as a human being. You need identity. Who are you going to be? An amorphous blob? You're going to ego eradicate yourself, and then who are you? And then I'm going to call you the name of the spiritual teacher that you still use as you sit there and vilify the ego and talk about how it's just got to go. All that does is put any of your shadow bits in the shadow deeper, and I'm watching you now trip all over yourself. How about you just own we're all messy. We got messy parts of our identity. We're flawsome, I call it. We're effed up and awesome. How about we move with that instead of trying to get rid of egos? Now, wounded egos, they do damage. And they show up through what? Patterns like the sociopath or the pathological narcissist. Those are two patterns that have done more damage to the world probably than anything. You can look at our history and our present time to get a real clue on that. So Saturn issues are abound. And how this works then is that we each carry in us a Saturn wound. And if you were to look to your Saturn sign in your birth chart, it would tell you more about what your Saturn wound is. The sign would talk about the pattern and the arena of where the pattern is in you that wounded you. And then the house that Saturn's in would talk about that deeper and the part of your development perhaps where that happened or where you felt the wound. So if you had Saturn, let's say in the 11th house, and let's just say it's Saturn in Cancer. Well, there is a real challenge to connect with one's emotional system. And let's say you're a man. Let's up it up, give some more specificity. I can't connect to my emotional system because that's going to make me look weak. Big boys don't cry. Because the outer authorities of patriarchy have told me this. But I am an HSP. I'm an empathic soul. I am a frickin' empath. And yeah, I'm in a male's body this time. So I'm a magnet for bullies. Yep. Happened right away at school. And this is not me, by the way, in terms of that is not my Saturn, but it's going to start sounding like my life. So yeah, people sniff out on me that I am under contract to, through Saturn and my Saturn journey of life, find power in the emotional side of life, find power in emotional connection and vulnerability. And people that, can't go near that because of what authority has done to them and their system, perhaps as a man, are going to emasculate me, bully me. Yeah. Until you get Saturn strong, and I'm going to say metaphorically, but back in the day, this was literal. Punch that bully in the face. Say, no. My feminine half of my psyche, I own now. I'm my own sovereign. The sovereign archetypes are part of Saturn. I'm my own emotional king. Now step the fuck back. That's Saturn. And, hey, you have just as value. You're enough. But step the fuck back. Because I'm not doing this anymore. And so that shows kind of when you reach a Saturn moment in yourself, in your own development. And that's a natal Saturn example. And how we can feel some kind of inadequacy with where Saturn is in our, as described by where Saturn is in our birth chart and the sign it's in. And it is our task to become stronger and our own authority from inside. And at first we'll hypercompensate. That's what a bully does. The bully's very sensitive. So sensitive, they're totally terrified that someone's going to find out, quote unquote, what a old school words here, sissy they are. So they got to go beat up the person that's weak. And that's the other side, a shadow side of Saturn. We'll do a shadow move. Shadow archetypes will develop to manage this vulnerability. That's the wounded ego. The healthy ego is the sovereign that then, once they step into their emotional system and they puff their chest as they do, goes out on the playground and says, hey, stop picking on that kid. What do you mean? This kid's a little sissy. Get out. I'm going to protect him. You want to find out who's the sissy? No. You get stronger with your Saturn, and then now you stand up for those who aren't. When you arrive there, now it's a part of your power. So, just to give you a deeper look at how Saturn manages an insecure esteem system, whatever for you became a liability or vulnerability through your parenting, your family patterns, what was imprinted, what culture and patriarchy said to you, we're in the domain of Saturn wounds. Now there's Chiron wound. I'm not going there, but it is different. So when you come around to your 28th year of life, that's when you first now have to step into some new measure of sovereignty around this thing you're meant to develop in this life. And if you look back to all your life experiences, you were always in this classroom. You were always in this classroom. So that man that's got the Saturn in the 11th house is about group energy, community, might feel like an orphan in community. Hey, there's not a lot of other men out here that are in their emotional system like I am. Where's my tribe? Which creates another sense of woundedness and vulnerability until they create the tribe. You have this in you somewhere. And I'm going to show on a chart later a little bit how to find it. So I got to leave that there. And then, when you have your second Saturn return, so the first Saturn journey, just bringing this up real quick again, for having said all that, the first Saturn cycle, it's ego development. What are you doing? You're developing into you. As per your soul agreements, as per your culture, society, family, patterns, etc. And then, and this is just a model. This is, showing a generic way this works, but we each have our own specific timing in all of this, right? And the thing to know about where you get wounded when it comes to Saturn is that wound will follow you through the rest of your development until you resolve it through inner authority, soul esteem, and step into the flip side of that wound, which is its gifts and its power. So this is the first 28 years. And there's a second wheel that's actually in the bigger, that I map out around the soul cycle, where the soul gets more involved on the second cycle. And there's a third. And all that's in this particular sponsored course. If you're so interested, it's right on my website. And I will actually put a link in the comments for it as well. But it's deep, y'all. I mean, this is deep stuff. It's very, very deep stuff. So when you're looking at how this all is, meant to play out in your own development, the thing to consider is where your Saturn is in your chart. Let me get back to myself here. And what your Saturn wounds are, your adaptations to that wound. And so, all right, that's specific natal. That's a lot of natal Saturn dynamics. But now we got to come back to the collective, which if you have Saturn in Pisces, man, this is really all for you in a lot of ways, but it's for all of us as well. So within Saturn transits, right now, let me put it into context of this timeline within this Saturn retrograde. And let's just get the retrograde on the map with dates, shall we? So this is the second of 3 retrogrades of Saturn in Pisces. Now, the first retrograde actually happened last year. So Saturn went into Pisces right around this time, March 11th. It actually was a little earlier than that. I believe it was the 7th in 2023. And right away started setting up its retrograde phase, because it's, if you look on the top there with that bar, you're going to see, okay, there's the retrograde zone. It goes from basically 0.5 degrees all the way to 7.25 degrees. That's the retrograde zone. That was last year. And there's always a midpoint in the cycle. That was August 27th. I'm not going to reference this a lot because we're a year now into the Saturn in Pisces journey, and now we're in a second retrograde. But I just want to put that on the map for you. And then now we're going to look at the second retrograde information, which is now. All right, so Saturn entered the retrograde zone this time, March 23rd. I want you to take a minute and just, and maybe because we're going fast and furious here, and I have to start wrapping up things before too long. I want you to take a minute, though. I want you to think about, hey, what started happening in your life? And if you need a coordinate, look to the world as well. That deals with everything I've been talking about. Inner authority versus outer authority. Let me say it another way. Something new trying to happen versus something old trying to, as the shadow tyrant side of Saturn, who swallowed all his children so they wouldn't overthrow him. What in you is swallowing the new creative forces that are wanting to be born? What in our culture is doing that right now? I'm going to get symbolic about Joe Biden. This isn't about agree or disagree. This is about archetypes. Joe Biden is the Titan, the Kronos king, right? And that's not right or wrong. We're all going to end up there someday. And what you have happening, if we looked at this symbolically, is the Zeus is going, wait a minute, I want you off the throne. You're not speaking to the Zeusan people. This is not a campaign of looking back. We have to have a campaign of looking forward. Looking back is oftentimes self-congratulatory. It can be an evaluation and a measure of accomplishment, which is wonderful and important information. But it also can be about the people who don't feel the progress now looking at the election through the eyes of apathy. Feeling powerless that anything will ever fucking change. Because there's always some tyrant king sitting on the throne eating the Zeus that's trying to create a new creative pantheon of energy. Archetypally, I think that is spot on. Now, coming to the earth level, there's a lot of other things, but get archetypal and play with it yourself. Get symbolic. Because the movement that I'm seeing I'll speak for Colorado, because that's where I live and it's what I know. And I happen to have some relationships with some of the senators here and other people that are in politics, okay? And the reason why there is a confrontation around, through Colorado, I can't speak to anywhere else, Biden staying in the race is because they are getting inundated with emails and letters from people, the younger Zeuses that want change. Not someone who can't get sentences strung together. And whether that's true or not, okay, we could debate that, but this is about perception. And there's this now Zeus-Kronos battle. It's mythic. The Greeks mapped it. We have it in us. And this is where we can look at this cycle. Saturn goes retrograde the 29th. The debate happens. And then boom, now the Zeus and Kronos battle starts. Just check it out. I'm not saying this is about agree or disagree. It's about looking at it technically and symbolically. Is there truth here? Now, if we follow the myth, it gets even more interesting, because what happens is eventually, Zeus does overthrow Kronos. So what we're looking at in ourselves and in culture is the old versus new. That's always a Saturn retrograde issue. In yourself, you have to go, what are the new creative things in me that are based in the Piscean part of me and the Piscean aspect of life, the mystical aspect of life, are trying now to sit on a new creative throne and create a whole new pantheon of creative options. And here's me going, okay, yeah, that's happening. And this is about you owning that through mystical maturity. You've got to mature onto that throne. You've got to move out of Piscean illusion. Are you in any? We're going to look at that. So it's very interesting when you take things from an archetypal point of view. Ideally, what it does is it neutralizes story and puts it back into karmic movements within the collective psyche. And it also pulls you out of identities that filter you in such a way that you get more and more blind sides. So if I were to say, what's the blind side here with the Joe Biden dynamic? The blind side is there's not a consideration for this element of a fiery Zeus going, no, moving on. And I'm a registered independent. So there's all this tribalism for me is interesting to watch from a distance. And it's why I left either party, because I don't want to be hijacked by either narrative. I want to be, as much as I can, always able to see with the eyes of Zeus. And then also then embrace the Saturn structure I'm going to need once I realize the goal, the vision, the dream that the inner Zeus downloads. All right, and then we got to go past that to Saturn and create it. So something to think about, food for thought, truly. All right, let's talk about how the retrograde transit works in 3 parts. So we're looking back at this particular timing, and this is what I want to share with you. Saturn's transits will operate like a dark night process. So that means that the first setup phase that started March 23rd, that's about becoming aware of a need for change in somewhere in your life. That's why I want you to think back to that time. I literally, like I said, I think I broke my wrist in a really, really rough way on March 19th. And then I had surgery on March 21st. And I'm not going to share some of that personal Saturn process, but I will tell you, true to astrology and its timing, it was like right on schedule, which gave me some sense of relief. But this first setup is about becoming aware of the need for change, oftentimes via negative karmic consequences that make you realize what you no longer want. Let me say it another way. A lot of times it's like I've hit a bottom with something in my life. So I want you to think about around late March, maybe early April, did something kind of flare up for you? And I just mentioned for the country, things were setting up that now we're in. Because that was the setup from March until the 29th of June was the setup phase. It's a long setup phase. Events, not all of them are necessarily, I would say, Saturn-esque. Some are more or less. But then Saturn stations and goes retrograde, and then it's this. This is the second part of the alchemy. All right, I just hit the bottom. I just hit the wall. I've had so many negative consequences, and a theme began to constellate around what Saturn and Pisces energies and that archetype's about. That now I got it. All right, so things are going to go retrograde. Now I got to consider how am I gonna change? What needs to change? And to the degree that you're paying attention, to the degree that you're actually willing to live in questions and let go of identities, and to the degree that you don't activate into a certain kind of triggered rigidity, is going to determine how this retrograde goes. Because if you haven't softened, released the grip, moved into curiosity, surrendered, then the retrograde gets amped up in a way where, okay, you broke your wrist at the beginning, Ohado. Here we go, retrograde. And you ain't listening, which I have been, trust me. So now it's going to be a deeper and harder dark night. What's a dark night? It's a dark night of an identity. It's a dark night of a pattern. It's the dark night of a way of seeing. It means something in you, in the Saturn Pisces territory of your development, most notably Pisces, it's got to go neutral. It's got to, if you will, die, if that works for you, because it is eating your potential. It is not letting it come forward. And if you don't surrender to this higher alchemy, now you will be in a Zeus Kronos battle with you. And of course, that'll play out outside of you as well, because that's how it works, right? So the retrograde is about a process of waking up via more karmic consequences, perhaps. We'll go into bargaining stages, perhaps, gaining more awareness with deeper issues and karmic forces, but then bargaining, denial comes back in. It's like, Kubler-Ross. And now we are slowly letting go, but no. Should I let go? Should I let the new Zeus take over? Should I let the new energy come in? And then, once you get farther enough to, let's say, the midnight point of the dark night, which is the surrender point of the dark night, new guidance can start coming in clearly. Why? Because an identity isn't distorting or filtering it anymore. If I could give some advice politically, the best thing the Democrats could do is just for a minute not be Democrats. Everybody, let's just not be anything other than curious people trying to get to a holistic solution that will work in a way that heals the country, if that's even possible. But what we then begin to do is experiment. Because once you've let go, it's like, okay, well, something new now can kind of start to come in, and then you got to experiment with that. And then when Saturn stations direct, let's get the dates back up. And that's going to happen November 15th. Then now we begin the process of edifying the new, taking Zeus into a Kronos steady, edified, scaffolded, new, embodied form. So that can be a new system, like new identities start coming online. I mean, it's going to be different for everybody. And then the integration phase, which is when we really get down to, okay, this new thing's come out, it's out. You've told yourself, the world, hey, there's this new creative part of me, mystical in this case, that's out here. Now you, from November 15th through February 18th, begin to integrate that into identity, into new flowcharts of co-creation, into, and whatever you, in your zone of life, you are here to do. And then Saturn will leave this second retrograde zone on February 18th, 2025. Now, briefly, there's always a midpoint of the cycle. That is when Saturn is in opposition to the sun, because this is Saturn in Pisces. This is about Saturn being in opposition to a sun in Virgo. Let's look at that chart just real quick. So if you look at this chart on September 7th, you can see Saturn at 16 degrees. If you can read a chart like this, in opposition to the sun at 16 degrees. Now, if you can't read a chart like this, then you're going to want to consult something that looks like this. And this is basically a legend that helps you understand the symbols for the signs and also the planets, because when you get into chart reading, you have to know that by heart and kind of understand to make sense of any of this. But This is interesting, September 7th. So all the stuff that we are now in chaos with, that on every level of life, from, let's just say, political spectrums, wars, your personal life, your personal zones, society, culture at large. The midpoint is sort of an awareness point of, depending on where we are. It could be an awareness point of, yeah, I'm not living this way anymore. Yeah, this system doesn't work. So fine, have it. God, universe. This identity is just sabotaging me. Okay, bye. You know, we get to this point where it's like, all right, you know, the sun illumining Saturn, and just like a full moon, when you have the moon in opposition to the sun, it's the same astronomical moment of the revelation, the solution, the destiny, the medicine that can help us heal this Saturn wound or whatever's going on. Around that time, there can be a real pivot and shift towards solutions, but it's about the new, and something new comes from something new. And we are conditioned to be conditional with the new. Oh, I want the new, but I want it in terms of the old. And this is where you realize that's not how co-creation or creation anywhere in this universe works. This is not in harmony with the laws of creation, the laws of light. So when we get into that integration phase, we have to do the hard work of acting on this new Saturn guidance, taking action, and we have to create the new, we have to experiment, we have to adjust to new Piscean systems and foundations. Now, let's get a little deeper, shall we, into Pisces. And then I'm going to bring it all together. So Pisces in astrology is known as a water sign. I'm sure you might know that. It is the last zodiac sign. So let me bring up the zodiac wheel again so that you can kind of image this with me. And it's that kind of like last sign just above Aries there, which looks like the horns. If you can reference the sidebar there, the legend, it's the last sign. So it represents, in a sense, the ending of a cycle of development. And actually, so does Saturn. They have that in common. But this ending is about ending the sense of separateness that the wounded ego especially almost bows before as a false god. And it is about maturing into an awareness. Pisces is about maturing into a mystical awareness that, whoa, we're all one. We're all in this ocean. We're all one. And Saturn is about the ending of identity or a pattern in favor of a new pattern, a new identity coming forward, and then integrating into personality, choice, consequence, karma. So both these signs, both of these archetypes represent endings to some degree. But I want to take a minute and redefine Pisces for you, because I think this is where the learning is. This is where the pivot to the heart happens. Now, oftentimes we thought of Pisces as just a water sign in astrology, and I've been doing some, what's the best word for this? Upgrading some of these signs to a different perspective. I did it with Aquarius around it not being solely an air sign, and now I'm going to do it with Pisces about it not solely being a water sign. I truly, intuitively have to tell you, I feel it's not solely a water sign. It is a water sign in part. And oftentimes you've got the fish swimming in different directions as a symbol. One can be said to represent the mind, one the heart, one the ego, one the soul, one yeah, and I think that works. But let's go further. Let's consider the fish to symbolize wave and particle. Let's go quantum. Let's consider the fish to symbolize the visible and invisible. Let's have it be considered as intentionality and self-effort versus surrender. One fish is the will, one is surrender of the will. Let's do power and powerlessness. And most notably, let's do human heart and cosmic heart or mystical heart. Now, the human heart is water. We're human, and we are in a human emotional system. That's one of the fish of Pisces. But the cosmic heart, to me, is grace. And if I could say this, well, I am saying it. Pisces is both water and grace. In a sense, water and mystical light. One fish is mystical light, grace, one fish is water. And it is about the journey of uniting the human heart to the cosmic one, to the heart, the soul's heart, if you will, the divine heart. Whatever works for you, riff around. But what grace is to me is a love substance. It's not really an emotion, but it can elicit emotion in the most beautiful way. It's eros. It's that magnetic, almost glue or fascia of the universe that the Greeks talked about that brings us together in love, that brings us together to the life force of life. And so I would say grace is all of that and something that connects us to holism. It plugs us into all that exists. It plugs us into mystical light. We primarily live in graceless times. And no more is that more evident than in politics, right? Or war, obviously. And that's something to consider. Do we act with grace? Do we live from a code of grace? Do we live from always intending to move with grace, create with grace, speak with grace, act with grace? Do we? Take 5 minutes on Twitter or X and tell me we do. We are bereft of this in such a deep and profound way, this element of grace, this co-element of Pisces. And living in the gracelessness of our times means what? It means that we are actually moving as co-creators in the world with only one fish of Pisces. And that fish being the human heart, the emotional system of who we are as humans. And the emotional system of being human is messy, beautiful, vengeful, caring. It is the full spectrum of human emotion, jealous, generally not super forgiving. And so it's interesting to me that people with one fish, one Pisces fish, are now being empowered into higher office, given the mic, and encouraging everyone else, ditch the other fish. Revenge is better. And we wonder why those of us who are empaths, who are soulful, spiritual, cultivate compassion, we wonder why we feel like we are collapsing. It's like a Piscean ecosystem collapse right now. And so this is about addressing this, I almost said Mercury, because that's coming up in a couple of weeks. This Saturn retrograde in Pisces is addressing the gracelessness, the graceless heart through the retrograde. So I would suspect we'll see more gracelessness. We'll see it gain in momentum until November 15th, when the retrograde is over. We're going to see more extreme expressions of gracelessness. We're going to see also the need for grace. And we're going to see that when we move within a world without grace, we create disgrace. And I don't mean that in a shame-based kind of, you've disgraced us kind of way. That's not what I mean there, to be clear. I don't do shame. I mean that as a technician. You being disgraced is removed from grace. And if you remove yourself from grace, you remove yourself from miracles, you remove yourself from light, you remove yourself from unconditional love, forgiveness, everything that's found in that other Pisces fish. Everything that the Piscean teacher Christ came to teach. Turn the other cheek. Don't seek revenge, turn the other cheek. Doesn't, in my interpretation, mean don't take karmic inventory or protect yourself or have boundaries. It's how you hold life and others in your heart. And so this is where my experience is as a gay man that came up through the 80s and 90s, and obviously till now, but back then when we were the disgrace of society. And what was really true was society was the disgrace to us. Under the guise of religion, not living in grace, not living in Christ's teachings when it came to gay people and others in my community. So I've lived this Saturn truth quite brutally through gay bashings and bullying and lack of rights and friends of mine being killed. And I think we can take a page from the gay community here. What did we do? Did we get hateful? And when Matthew Shepard was hung on a fence in Wyoming, did we get hateful? Did we go out and match that bad vibe? No. We shifted hearts and minds by being who we are as loving, graceful people. And I'm being generic in general because not everybody's nice no matter what group you're in. But as a community. And I have a fundamentalist Baptist aunt. And she, used to pray for my soul and all this stuff. And I have done so many things for my family that a few years ago, she said, I have to tell you something. You're the real Christian. I had it wrong. And when I speak through that energy with the cosmic heart in me, the grace in me active, this is where this energy is where I think we can have some mystical pivots in our politics, in our relationship with each other, in our relationship with ourselves. And I have to say, it's not going to come from our minds. Pisces, the Piscean realm of energy, has nothing to do with your mind. There's nothing logically rational about forgiveness. Hammurabi's code, eye for an eye, that's the logical solution, right? So if Israel is attacked by Hamas in a horrific way, which they were, then the code is we get to attack them equally as horrifically, because that is really how we do create in the world as human beings right now. That's just a self-evident truth. We have not yet connected the other fish in a way where we won't have war again, or we won't seek war for solutions. And I'm not placing a judgment on that per se. I'm naming karmic territory. But it is maybe rather that we need to ask some different questions here. Why do we still co-create through war? How could we do this differently? Can we? Let's look at the karmic forces. the gods of Israel, the gods of Hamas? Do they get on? The gods themselves? No, they don't. So now, where I want to go with this is that what comes with Pisces is paradox. What comes with mystical territory is paradox. So even if you right now, and I can ask you, hey, do you feel connected? Do you feel connected to grace, to light? And you might go, barely. Most days, not at all. And I would embrace that as your experience and embrace it as true for you, 100%. Because I feel that way too sometimes, right? Yet the paradox is we're never not connected to grace. We're never not connected to love. That's all that there is. There's love and lessons in love. That's all. That's it. That's it, folks. That's the end game of the zodiac. That's the final lesson of the zodiac. There's love and lessons in love. Hate is a lesson in love. War is a lesson in love. So Saturn's saying you need to start building structure around love. You need to edify systems of love in yourself and in your communities, in your societies. Because the pressures ahead from climate change alone, let's just newsflash this. It just gets worse from here. We've tipped. It just gets worse every year. And if you doubt that, look back over the last 5-6 years. Without exception, it's gotten worse, and it will continue to get worse. The rest of our lives, this is our reality now. And this is when we need lessons in love. How can we come together and love ourselves through it and come together and realize if we don't, we're done. We're done. Earth will regenerate some way. Gaia's fine. I ache for all the animals that won't make it, and the human beings, but hey, karma's a teacher and teaches lessons in love. So when we feel disconnected, that's a truth, and also it's not true, both and. Because it's like being in a room where there are electrical gray sockets. You're just not plugged into one right now. But there's grace all around the room flowing through. And then the question the Saturn Retrograde in Pisces asks is, how do you plug in? Why do you unplug? How'd you get unplugged? Have you ever plugged in? And so when we look at this, I would look to fish in a sense, because when we look at fish, they can't survive in the pure oxygen of the mind. They have to be in water. They have to be in something where they access oxygen, but the medium itself is not pure oxygen. So there's a clue. Our minds are not getting us out of this. What will? Our hearts. I mean, it sounds so cliche, but it is the absolute truth. So when you look at this Pisces, this Saturn and Pisces retrograde, now let me break it down through all my notes here, and let's get real. Let's get real about your life. Let's get real about life. You can't access mystical light. Now, the whole title of this is Transforming Your Life Through Saturn's Laws of Mystical Light. I have been teaching you Saturn's Laws of Mystical Light. You can't access mystical light through identities that would block it, identities that would keep it away. Hey, I'm not so sure any political identity is accessing mystical light. Let's just start there. I see equal abuse toward each other from all of it. So the question then becomes, Saturn, all right, are you willing to mystically mature? Are you willing to actually not just talk about forgiveness, but grow up and now move with a system of forgiveness as part of how you move in the world? Are you willing to look at what it really takes to create something? Discipline, time, patience. And that can vary from whatever it is you want to create, but that's still the formula of getting something on the planet. Or are you going to still look for the life hack, the next pill, the next thing, the next bypass, the next illusion? What are you going to do? We have to start, if we want to get through these growing pains that are part of coming into this age of Aquarius, these growing pains of now consciously being one world, which is the main pattern of Aquarius, one world consciousness. We've always been one world, but now we're aware. We got to start creating policies, laws, trade, climate dynamics, resource dynamics that honor. We're all one. We cannot do that and keep going as we have, but we already know what that's going to do. We're living it. And that'll just get worse. So this is about a fundamental shifting. And where does it start? It starts with you. It starts with me. And then from you and me, we start to become a we. And this Saturn and Pisces shift is about creating for yourself new structures, mystical structures of how you live your life, new mystical patterns. And I don't mean to say necessarily, and I'm not excluding this either, but this isn't about, well, you're right, Robert, I need to meditate more. No, I didn't say that. That might be great for you to do and might be a wonderful contribution to peace on earth. But I'd rather you start telling yourself the truth about what is happening in the world. I'd rather you start being informed versus infected. I'd rather you mystically mature to such a degree you have a soul screen, SPF soul screen that weeds out psychic viruses, misinformation, bullshit, and actually keeps you centered in not love and light, but hardcore, on the earth, in the grit, rescuing dogs love. Working at homeless shelters love. Frontline love, rebellion love. I'd rather that show up than an extra 10 minutes of meditation or a meditation app. Those are great. Anything to help, right? But if I'm Saturn, I'm looking at that and going, okay, that's for level 1 alchemists. You're level 5. Get with it. When you feel yourself overwhelmed emotionally, that's your truth. Let's take a minute, evaluate your system to understand why and where. And let's see, how can we clean up the psychic hygiene? I'll tell you exactly how you clean that up. You realize how you got dirty in the first place. First thing. How did I become a psychic pigpen? What newsfeed was it? What gossip bullshit was it? What triggered news broadcast did I watch? What political tribal voices in my head telling me what's real, what's not? What is enough? All of it out. And then you come to the light. And you say a prayer. I need mystical light. Get in here. Get my compass, true north. And show me the next empowered step. The next step of grace from here. The next contribution to humanity from here. The next act of unconditional love and self-care for myself from here. Whatever it is. This is what Saturn and Pisces, from my point of view, at high level alchemy, is bringing. It is saying all that exists, it came from the light, came from the wave form. Saturn is the transducer of the light into matter, whether that matter is how your patterns create your life, or whether that matter is how you're psychologically wired, whether that matter is how trauma co-creates. These are all transducers of light. And it's about, hey, there's lessons in love here. What are mine? What are mine? You know, honestly, with Saturn, you don't have to look too far. It's self-evident. It's right there in your face. Saturn is not hiding. And that's what's so great about connecting with Pisces. It's like, you all think Pisces is this amorphous, you know, mystical, illusory realm. It ain't. It isn't. There's an organized creative flow of law in every dimension of creation. And it's consistent and congruent. There's a through line of the present moment from dimension to dimension. Time is not necessarily illusion. We do experience it in a different way here incarnated than we would in the energetic realms. But whatever exists at all times ever and in every dimension is only the present moment. When you don't have an earth realm and clocks, it feels like it's an eternity up in the energetic space. But you know what? There's still actually a movement of things are changing. Galaxies show us this. The whole universe shows us this. Everything is in flux forever and always. And so, can you mystically grow up and go, okay, no more timeline jumping and quantum jumping bullshit. Fuck that. I'm going to feel what I feel. I'm going to get raw. I'm going to get real. Who needs my help? Hey, you know what? Check this out. I've heard this thing that if I'm depressed, I should go help someone else. Well, that doesn't sound like it makes much sense because guess what? That's the last thing I feel like doing. And in some cases, you shouldn't. But let me offer both and. Let's go Saturn Pisces here. You know why it could help? Because when you go help someone else, what did you just do? You just plugged yourself back into holism. You stepped out of you for a minute and your identities that are freaking out, going through their victim parties, and you went, wait a minute, let me go help that person over there who's a little bit lower in the victim experience than I am, and let me lift them up. And poof, light hit me. How did the light hit me? Why do I feel better? I thought I'd feel worse. This just happened to me. Because I got out of the story of separateness. And in that act of helping that person, it broke the bond and illusion of separateness. Connected me to them. And then all of life got access to me again. What I think a lot of this also deals with in terms of social media, let's start seeing each other face to face. I'm doing an in-person workshop every freaking year, twice a year from now on. Enough. I love the internet. It's been wonderful. We need each other in real time. And I say that more to your friends and your personal life and your family. And start to realize Facebook friends aren't necessarily really friends. Have a mystically mature understanding of friendship from now on. A mystically mature understanding of what a narcissist and a vampire are about. A mystically mature understanding of magnetics for yourself. And that it forever and always will be your patterns that hold the magnetics, not your vision board. You're codependent. You're a magnet and a match for, I don't know, alcoholic, narcissist, someone who needs rescuing, someone who's stuck in their child archetype. Boom, that's a match. You're an interdependent. You're not going to match with that. You're going to see it coming and you're going to go, oh, God, no. I need a partner, not a project. Keep it bottom line. Keep it real. It's actually not as complicated as we've been led to believe. Saturn and Pisces is like, get rid of all this nonstop shit in your Instagram feed and start to evaluate, is this actually useful for me? Is this serving my life? If it is, great. But maybe some of it's just more shit to put in your head. And maybe someone who's saying that is actually coming from shame, and they don't even know. They're just reinforcing your shame. I could go on example after example. I've read this in the psyches of people for 2 decades, technically. So there is a lot here, but it all comes back to the heart. What's your relationship like with your human heart? Have you ever had an experience of the mystical heart zapping you? I've had many. Seek that, cultivate that. Whenever you are in either or mentality or thinking, stop, get in your heart and ask, what's the both and here? What's the intuitive choice? The one that serves the holism of all the most. That's the intuitive choice. There are no perfect choices. They do not exist. There aren't perfect political candidates. They do not exist. There's the holistic choice. The most holistic in that moment. That's the intuitive choice. There's intuitive boundaries. The boundaries needed in the moment. Hey, you're kind of in a mood. You relapse in alcoholism. I got to put up a different SPF. Ooh, you're back in recovery. Okay, let's shift the SPF now and give me some of that vitamin D, baby. Come on. Get out of formula. Get into this, the knowing, the feeling, and the feeling gives the knowing. And I think you're going to heal. I think you're going to have access to miracles. I think you're going to have access to light. And I mean the light that created this whole planet, which many of us may call God, or I don't know. But I do know, in as much as it can help you, that this Saturn and Pisces cycle is about growing up into mystical maturity. I do know that. So if you were to look at your life now, the lessons, let's talk about them as lessons. The lessons afoot. And start to consider, okay, I'm learning lessons here. Because I'm going to tell you something. This is a big ass key. Between your mystical heart and your human heart sits your shadow victim. And it regulates how much light, mystical light, your human heart can take and receive. Because the shadow victim in all of us wants to have power. What kind of power? Power of entitlement, power to get even, power to make you pay because you did this to me or that to me. The power to sue because you did this or that to me, which I'm not saying that's, hey, sometimes that is an actual healing thing to do. But what is also on call here, what is also in the classroom is we have power, yeah. But do you know where it ends? Do you know where your power ends? Do you assume that you could have power where you never will have power? Do you think getting on social media, for example, and apply this to anything in your life that works. I'm just using this because it's very real and raw, and I've been seeing it nonstop. But do you think shaming someone to vote for someone actually helps that out? Do you think putting someone down and calling them a name, like bedwetter, is actually something that endears them to your cause or to your point of view? Do you think, what are we doing? Do you think those things are really helpful and useful? How's that worked for you? How does it feel when someone does that to you? Doesn't it just kind of make you go, fuck you? Yeah, for most people, it probably does. And that's what I'm saying. It starts with all of us. Taking a minute and realizing I can't move in the world as a shadow victim. I can't put a shadow victim on a ballot as a candidate. I can't go there. I'm a co-creator. That means, yeah, shit's going to happen. That's life. I'm going to have whatever response I do that's genuine. That's also part of me being in that life. And I'm going to have shadow victim moments. We all will. Oh, hell yeah. And we don't need to shame ourselves for it. But I'm going to tell you karmically, moving from shadow victim consciousness is not useful. It isn't healing. It does not engage in true alchemy, and it certainly does not open the floodgates of unconditional love or mystical light. Because it's you saying to the whole, I know better than the whole. This shouldn't have happened to me. In some cases, that could be true. And in some cases, laws need to be changed. That shouldn't have happened to you. Let's fight the good fight. Let's stage a love rebellion. But in that love rebellion, in that lawsuit, I'm not in a shadow victim identity. I'm in my love rebel. Hey, I am establishing a new precedent here that we all have value and mine was violated. And I want to make sure it doesn't happen again. And so therefore, whether I win or lose this lawsuit has no bearing on whether I feel like I have value, because it's not about my value. I have value. Look at every divorce where that is not what is going on. People are fighting War of the Roses for value. And let me take my husband to the cleaners, or take my wife down, or husband down, whatever it is. Why? Well, they had an affair. Okay, and I'm going to sit there as an intuitive and tell you all affairs are co-created, and that's going to make your shadow victim scream at me. And then your soul's going to go, yeah, he's right. He cheated on you because you were cheating on you in some way. Now, has he opted out of his responsibility for his actions? No. But are you going to now become the jilted wife or husband? I mean, come on. The world's burning. Come on. These are lessons in love. Come on. What were you born for? What light do you got? We need it. Start building something that lets that come into the world. How about some soul esteem, some healthy soul esteem? You're enough no matter what. And guess what? So is everyone else. Nothing could ever make you less than. You've never been less than. You'll never be less than. How about let's start there? Let's get that as your truth moving forward. If you're enough right now what do you want to do with your life? Because you've lived your whole life chasing enough. Now what? These are the pings, the zings, the 2x4s, perhaps, that you might be going through. We all are in some way, right? Culturally, we are. When it comes to mystical territory, it will not meet up with our mind very well. We want to take our victim and go, well, things are fair or unfair. There's a place for that in co-creation on this planet, in this plane. And there's also a realm and a moment where that falls apart and it isn't the useful truth. Can you differentiate the difference? The main thing is, have you made being a victim an identity? Or was being victimized simply an experience that you had as part of lessons in love? These are the Saturn in Pisces lessons, questions. So I can't encourage you enough to get in on this, because I walk through 12 lessons. So I'll show you a few. The first one, mystical identity and ego. How does Saturn ask us in Pisces to create a mystical identity and bring that to the ego? What is that? Second lesson, holistic dimensional equality. How do we live now in a holistic worldview of reality where everyone has equality? And that means you're enough. And how do we understand dimensional differences when it comes to how we work with value? Meaning, hey, does a $5 million home have the same value as a $500,000 home? No. So there are things in this realm that we have to go, okay, there are markets that determine value. Is that right or wrong, good or bad? I'm not going to say it is. Dimension to dimension, we got to understand how we come to value things from both the human heart and the mystical heart. Then we get to lesson 3. mystical logic and divine order. What's mystical logic? What's divine order? You know, I'm a provocateur, obviously, as a teacher to some degree. And I think it's part of my purpose. Press buttons, trigger. Yeah. But I don't do it to be an asshole. I do it so you wake up to what your truth is. It doesn't have to be mine. So recently I wrote something about Biden having such a horrible debate. And I didn't write an opinion. I wrote a question. You know what that question was? I'll leave it with you. And that speaks to this lesson. If everything happens for a reason, what was the reason for Biden having such a horrific debate with Donald Trump to where he was going blank and out of nowhere saying, we beat Medicare, which was not germane to anything that was happening at the time or the questions being asked, to him blank staring. This was a cognitive lapse. Let's just be clear. You cannot tell me I did not see that. I saw that. That's a cognitive lapse. I am a background in psychology. I know what they are. I had a parent who had that too. I know what it is. Now, okay, so that you will never change my perspective on what I saw. I saw an insurrection at the Capitol. I don't care what your tribe thinks. I have enough inner Saturn authority to tell you that and clarity to go, no, that's not what happened. There were gallows being erected for Mike Pence. They were on the hunt for Nancy Pelosi. Excuse me, they beat the heads in on police officers. What are you talking about? So let's, first of all, cut the crap. And that doesn't mean we have to like telling truths. Sometimes it's really not fun. I get it. But if everything happens for a reason, then what was the reason for that? Was that divine design for us to see Biden shaky? Was that possibly the reason? I'm not saying it was. I'm telling you to ask yourself the question. What was the reason for the attempted assassination of Donald Trump? If everything happens for a reason, and the thing is this, and this is my point, Saturn in Pisces is saying, stop immediately latching on to your mind and the tribal narratives. Shut it down and go in for a few days and then see what from your interior comes forward as the answer. And in fact, don't stop there. Live in that question because there might be multiple holistic answers to why Biden had that lapse, why Trump was, nearly assassinated. And if we don't stay curious and open, and this is the lesson, Saturn and Pisces, we start to become walled in, blindsided, and then we think what we see alone is all there is, and that's the truth in the story. And that's how elections are lost. Just a sidebar. What I'm saying is not just to apply to these really relevant and very out there examples. It's for everywhere in your life. Don't immediately assume some narrative or something. I had a friend just unfriend me on Facebook that I knew from high school because I wasn't replying fast enough to him these last 2 years when I had a parent dying of cancer, 2 pets die, broke my humerus. My mother had a series of strokes. And I ran a membership and I worked and I propped everyone up in my family financially, including myself. And I'm in a lawsuit where I am the plaintiff. All of that the last 2-3 years, of which my friend knew nothing, but he assumed I just didn't want to invest in the friendship. And I just confronted him on it. I'm like, but we're all him. We're all him. And this cycle going retrograde saying, you do not know all the information. It's impossible for any of us to know that. Aren't we better served by taking a minute and go, what really is the optimal intuitive risk, the optimal intuitive choice? Let me go blank. Let me get all these voices out of my head. And now let me just ask the universe, what is the first thing I, in the holism of all of this, need to know about it? And then maybe, if we all do this, I can share with you what I'm getting. You can share with me what you're getting. We can also call each other out on filters and identities that might be in play that are problematic to clear perception. We can do it with love instead of the shame game and what I see happening with the Democrats right now. Where do you think that karma is going to go? Where do you think it? Become a karmic technician. Become a mystical alchemist. And really, I'm telling you, you have no idea, perhaps you do, but you likely don't, how powerful mystical light is. Real connection to grace, to light, such that it heats your whole body up once it comes through you. And how that is the X factor. That is the game changer. But the human heart on its own cannot summon it. It's got to connect to the mystical first. It's a technical thing. It's just a technical truth. And that's what this Saturn retrograde in Pisces is saying. This is a technical truth. There are 12 lessons for you that you're going to need to get into to understand the holism of this. And once you get into it, lesson 4, hey, where are you really from? Cosmic origins and human hearts. Where are you really from? Are you actually on a soul level a Republican or Democrat? What the fuck? Really? Because you act like it. Why are you doing that? You know, this is the kind of, and for ourselves, like compassionately, but also unflinchingly confronting identities, confronting their narratives, confronting our blind sides, knowing we have them, and we always will. Having a structured and disciplined way of getting to clarity, which is what I'm teaching in my Vertical Intuition Masterclass, an actual structured way to do that. Because that's how I got so good as an intuitive. With blind sides, that I have blind sides, certainly personally. But man, when it comes to reading someone, I really don't have too many. Because I learned a system. Saturn likes systems. Saturn likes structure. Saturn likes having things pattern around and then build and strengthen things. And this time it's about the mystical skills. It's about the mystical level of who we are. And I can't say that without talking about your mystical heart. So you can both be utterly devastated by the flattening and bombing of Gaza and be utterly, absolutely devastated by Hamas slaughtering the Israelis in their kibbutz. You can do both. And in fact, that's what the mystical heart does. And then the mystical heart would say, how can we get out of this? Can we? And sometimes, frankly, you can't. The karmic forces are too strong. And then that's information. You, as a mystically mature adult, go, that's not ending in my lifetime. That goes back 100 years. And there's forces in play. There are eye for an eye forces in play here. And until perhaps both sides come to another way to work with this lesson in love, that's just going to keep going. And so I hope this was helpful. Now, let me riff around real quickly. I cannot believe, my God, how long I've gone. I do want to tell you though, listen, this series is 50% off now and it ends on the 31st. Definitely give it a look. Let me show you just a little bit more of what's in it. I'm going to teach you about your axes of co-creation per Saturn as well as Pisces. You're obviously going to go through all 12 of these lessons. And then you're going to have workbook stuff here that looks at Saturn and just as an archetype deeply, and then also how to identify your Saturn archetypes, some questions and stuff there. This thing is huge, massive, incredible. I put so much work into it. I couldn't even promote it a year ago because it wiped me out with how much I put into it. I felt so passionately compelled to do it because you can tell from my passion right now, this matters to me. This is why I'm on the planet, is to share insights like this. And I know I'm probably going to get some bad comments and stuff, and that's okay, because I'm coming from love, and that's all I need to know. And I hope that in some way there's love cracks happening where light's getting in and love is getting in, and you're getting out of identities and questioning, maybe I am doing this in a way that does not serve my holism or the holism of life. Maybe I'm moving in ways, choosing in ways, perceiving in ways, existing in identities in ways that are taking me out of love. And love doesn't mean that we don't have boundaries, that we don't defend what we value, that we don't have rebellions. What it does mean is I have love rebellions. I have love boundaries. It means I fight the good fight. That's the fight I have to fight, or I disconnect from my own self and my sense of love. Pisces is, which I love about it, drenched in mystical paradox. I love it. So let's see if we can, at a birth chart where I'm going to show you where the Saturn retrograde is happening. Now, first, to frame this, I want you to look at the actual zone of the degrees of Pisces, because that's what we're going to do in the chart. So coming back to the second retrograde, we're looking at basically 13 degrees all the way to 19.5 degrees. If you want to round up to 20-ish, do you? Most astrologers tend to round up, including me. So I could even go back to 12 degrees, but really, if we're going to get very specific to a birth chart, I think in this instance, we want to be kind of really true to the actual degrees. So it's like 12.75. And this is, in terms of degrees, this is about the arc of a circle, 360-degree arc of a circle. So not temperature, so you're aware. Now, let's go ahead and take a look here at, and let me see if I can get this light a little brighter for this chart. I'm working on fixing the visibility of this. So we're going to look at this chart. This is Nancy Smith. Now, if you want to look at her chart a little better, this is her chart. This is a fictitious person, by the way, born November 14th, 1983. My only purpose of bringing this chart up is for you to have some example of where to find Saturn in your own birth chart, if that's something you haven't already done or you'd like to try out and see if you can figure out. And then that will once again take a lot of what I've said, this high alchemy stuff I've been talking about, and put it in a deeper context to what this cycle means for you personally. Now, coming to Nancy's chart, I'm going to do this as best I can. Like I said, the lighting's a little dark, but so this is the same chart that I just showed up there. And if you know astrology, once again, you might know these symbols. If you don't, you'll need to use a bit of a legend. But this is Pisces right here, okay? And that is her 10th house cusp. I'm sorry, not 10th, 9th house cusp. It's a little better. All right, terrible handwriting. So Saturn currently is going to be in this house, the 9th house, because that's where it is. Now it's retrograde. And because it is covering the degrees of 12.75, so I'm going to say that's kind of like here and going all the way to 19 in this retrograde cycle. So let's just say that's the 19 degrees Pisces and the 12.75 degrees Pisces retrograde zone. So if you're looking at your birth chart, you want to see where Pisces is cusping a house. And as you can see, it actually ends in the 9th house, and then the 10th house is cusped by Aries over here. So Saturn would be in her 9th house in Pisces, and that's where her Saturn developmental focus in terms of this activation would be occurring. Also, she's got a moon in Pisces where Saturn is going to, or already actually has, come up to and sat right on it in what's called a conjunction. And when you have planets that are, in astrology, we say transited by a transiting planet like Saturn moving in the sky, it brings an alchemy, a lesson, a Saturn alchemy and lesson to this part of the human psyche, this part of one's inner nature, because it's the moon. This could also deal with a person's relationship to their family, perhaps the mother. And what I would say that, so I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to tell you, okay, we're going to fictitiously do a little intuitive reading in addition to this astrology. Let's just say Nancy came in with a Pisces moon, and I'm going to say she is somebody who is incredibly sensitive, very much empath-based person. But because I've seen this happen where someone is so sensitive, they don't even realize they're that sensitive. And all their life, they've primarily been influenced by everyone else's energy. Because when we're 5, 3, 2, we don't have psychological sophistication enough to manage a Pisces moon, if you will, in our development as children. And therefore, we're more sensitive and impressionable to the energies of other people. And that means then we take on that energy. And I have a whole masterclass on this called the Empathic Soul and Love Rebel that deals in exactly that phenomena. And I call this the phenomena that should and needs to be addressed by a multisensory psychology instead of just basic clinical psychology. So this is for her a time of having to do everything I just said, mystical maturity, but greatly, just for now, this piece in relationship to her moon in Pisces. And in the 9th house, this is about working on how she engages in her views of spirituality, the bigger picture, her belief in herself, her capacity, in this case, Saturn saying, hey, you've got to mystically mature. You need mystical boundaries. You need to engage in a multisensory understanding of your psychology and start to understand adaptations that happened in childhood that are identity for you now, and actually direct your belief system, 9th house, how you believe in yourself, 9th house, a lot of your confidence or lack thereof, 9th house, your capacity to take risks, 9th house. This is about you having to really come to terms with you've played and lived life very small because you had no other mechanisms developed to protect your sensitivity so that you could move in a chaotic, cacophonous world with all this emotional energy all around you. And then you could feel then in context to all of that self-directed. You've mostly lived your life in a hijacked state emotionally because you feel it all. Now, the gift here is you feel it all. And that can become a skill. That can become, that can move into the zone of becoming an empathic spiritual director, someone who helps people see their life purpose. This is 9th house arena. This is also, by the way, this empathic energy is something you brought into life with you. The moon often represents a soul level of energy, pattern, and gifts that come with us. It's our base. And so this could also be, let's riff, hey, this Saturn in Pisces transit is about you've got to come out with the truth of who you really are, how you really operate, and you've got to give up the identities that have kept this aspect of who you are hidden, protected in ways where you're not nourished and emotionally connected, and you've got to have a new understanding of how to relate to life outside of the empathic victim consciousness, the empath that's so sensitive, life feels like it's victimizing them. Drop it. That identity doesn't serve you, doesn't serve your belief in yourself. It doesn't give you both and options of being highly sensitive and also someone who can set a boundary, tell someone to fuck off and mean it with all the love in your heart. And by the way, you know when you've had a limit and you need to be alone, and grab that hermit archetype and go take a bath. As a technical act of self-care, not a victim move. Oh, I'm so overwhelmed. I just need to stay inside for a year. No. Overwhelm will happen. You'll recognize it. And as a mystically mature adult, guess what, Nancy? You're going to handle it. It's been handled. And all of that does what? It's serving your Scorpio sun down here. This is the destiny you signed up for. You are a Scorpio, a ton of other stuff going on in the chart I'm not going to get into. I'll take the sun on, however. And you know what this Scorpio is about? It is about what? Becoming an alchemist. You are going to be an empathic spiritual director that guides people into how to work with their shadow and emotional shadow dark energies. And you'll be so damn accurate as an emotional intuitive, understanding their profile and their system, that you are going to thrive in that work. But guess what? You got a Saturn in Scorpio. So you've got some Saturn work to do around how your family dealt with dark feelings, survival threats, trauma. And this, if you will, ancestral genetic archetypal code that's in your system, you've got to become stronger and that will happen with shrewd Saturn-based emotional honesty. And everyone you meet, the first question, Nancy, you're going to need to ask about them is, I wonder what their shadow's like. Not to make them wrong, but so that you understand the emotional energies that their shadow emits, manipulates with, perhaps, moves in the world with, represses, projects, and scapegoats. Because, up to now, Nancy, you've been a people pleaser. And life has called you to something of a greater measure that requires an unprecedented empowerment, an empowerment you've never even thought was possible, let alone could language and even knew you needed. All right, enough with Nancy. But if you want to find your Saturn transit, that's how you do it. You get that chart out. I am using the Placidus system. It's my preferred system. You go with whatever works for you, whether that's Koch, equal house. There's different house systems, FYI. And I think all of them can work to some degree. And after 10,000 readings, this is the one that I have found for me is the most accurate as a way to ground the person into who they are and who they're born to become, etc. So that is what you would do. You'd want to look now. The 9th house, Saturn Pisces, is going to be also a complete maturing of one's understanding of God, of co-creation, of mystical law, of their life philosophy around these things. So if you just generally had that going on up there, that just gives you a little taste of it. What you could do is, if you have astrology software, if you have a friend that does, get a chart done. There's free ones online. At one point, we'll have a chart making software on my website that looks a lot like this that will be free. And you can do charts there. But that's how you find your own transit. Now, I could go on and on, obviously, but I must stop. My chocolate lab, Charlie, is probably pooping on the floor. I have no idea. Listen, soul to soul, these are really hard times. You're not making it up. I come back to, we were born for these times. That doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean that we won't have our shadow victim parties. I'll join you. Just let me know. I'll be there, and I'll bring, like I said, the wine, maybe some whiskey. It doesn't mean that we won't have confusion and find ourselves self-sabotaging. We're messy. It's okay. Let's just let each other be a little messy. Let's start there. That's mystical heart territory. Hey, I'm messy. I see you're a little messy. Okay, let's hang out and be messy. I think we need to give each other truly a little room to be human and messy. I am really tired, if not irritated and sometimes angered by a lot of the cancel culture and the calling people out because they didn't speak up about this issue or that issue. Hey, I have heard no one talk about the Sudan. So guess what? There's so many issues. We're all going to have something that for us personally is where we find we're called to say something. I think it's more important to focus on your grace versus what someone else's grace is or isn't doing as per your perspective. I don't find that useful. Now, both and. If you're following a spiritual teacher that won't go toward the hard topics and you feel like you need to address that to them, all right, I understand that. That won't get into the mystical grit and dirt. I understand that. Trust me, I'm the teacher that rolls in the dirt and gets irritated by some of that myself. However, where do you want your energy to go? We don't have unlimited energy. We don't have unlimited time on this planet. We don't have unlimited anything except for maybe mystical light once we learn how to hook on in. And I want you to think very seriously about what is compassion. There's two ways to approach it: to suffer with, which is a very Christian understanding of that word and its etymology. Suffer with Christ. I like that because it's about, I feel you. I'm not feeling for you, but I'll feel this with you. Give me your hand. I'll feel it with you. I'm here. This is your cross to bear, but I will feel the journey with you. I can't take away your mountains or your lessons, but I'm here to feel with you. That's compassion. And then there's the Buddhist to encompass. Compassion and encompass, where it's just about, I am better served letting more into my circle of compassion because now I'm not resisting, fighting against it, or grasping toward it. It just gets to be. I don't have to like it, but it's here. It's part of what's happening in life right now. And if I allow it to be here and just accept that it's here, now the alchemist in me can be like, okay, how can we shift this to gold? You can never shift what you will not acknowledge and what you will not accept. Hear that again. You will never change what you cannot acknowledge or accept. You may, but I'll both and there, you may be able to change it, but you are coming into the transformation in a resistance-based state because you haven't let it be okay that it's there yet. And your alchemy will be greatly compromised. And how you change it may do more damage than good, certainly for your system. So, another practice from Saturn and Pisces. I want you to look at everything that I said that's pissed you off, everything that pisses you off about the world right now. And I want you just to take a moment and go, you know what? It gets to be here. It's here. I can go deny it's part of reality, but then what? I can't change it very easily or if at all. So what does an addict have to first do? Admit they're an addict. Admit they have a problem. Until that happens, there's no change in that problem. These are technical, transformative, alchemical truths. We need more of that for ourselves, for the world. And I want you, in every circumstance you can, and give full reign and compassion to all your feelings. They all get to be here too, by the way. The dark emotions get to be here. The days of not wanting to get out of bed get to be here. The days where you feel like I just can't even get this shit done because it takes like 5 times the effort. And now I just don't give a fuck get to be here. It all gets to be here if you want it. I'm telling you, it gets to be here. You cannot even like me. That gets to be here. Okay, cool. That's fine. Let me model some soul esteem. I'm enough whether you like me or not. You're enough whether you like yourself or not. Oh my God, that Pisces paradox. Now we're swirling and swirling now. Your power alone will not pull off this life. You will, and this is a Piscean lesson, need to find your way of connecting to whatever greater power is to you. And I mean that in a spiritual sense, in a mystical light sense. So when you find, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Nah, you're not, but you and a greater power will. So I'll pray that up. So pray it up for everybody. There is so much suffering going on right now in a way that it's hard sometimes just to live. You just feel it all. And you look at it all and you just think, oh my God, how can human beings talk to each other this way on Instagram and Twitter? How can you? Well, don't you be the person talking that way. Always be respectful. And in every situation from now to the end of your days, I want you to ask, what's the best my grace can do in this situation? Bring that word in. And if someone comes at you with their venom, with their hate, ask them that question. Hey, is that the best your grace can do here? Most of the time when I've used that shadow dancing maneuver, they are stumped and stunned. I just recruited and summoned their soul and they can't even speak. And that's not to shut them up. It's to bring their soul here and go, listen, we're here in a shared classroom and we're not here forever. Is this what you want to be doing with your energy, your life force, your love? Is this what you want to do? That's for them to answer, by the way. But it's for you to answer as well. And lastly, and I said this years ago, but I want to bring it back because it applies to this. Every day that you are feeling, ugh, God, all we get is now what? A warmer climate, more shit, more crazy. This is life now. I'm going to offer a pivot. And that pivot's this. Yeah, this is perhaps life now, but you don't know the X factors of mystical light. I don't either. Let's start working with that. There's certain laws in play, lessons, maturity necessary to do that. I've given a lot of it here. The rest of it's in my series. And then once you get that down and you start working as a mystically mature adult, you start working through those 12 lessons, you start to get access to this light. And you know what I mean when I say mystical light. Now it's a different game. And the next thing that I think becomes your responsibility, Saturn, is using this question as a guide. How can I be the answer to someone's prayer? We are all called to be the answer to someone's prayer. And I hope that I was the answer to yours today in some way. So with that, I'm going to end this long ass live. And I truly hope you do check out my series because I can't tell you how much it's going to change your life. And I'll be seeing you again in a couple of weeks. We got a Mercury retrograde coming up. But in the meantime, let this all sit in, take it in. Please share this around. And if you would, please give me a thumbs up on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you are. I would really appreciate it. A lot of effort and time, obviously, goes into everything I do, and I don't fuck around. And I do it to help people because I really care. Can't help it. I've always cared, and I just can't help it. So, lots of love to you, and I'll see you again soon. Remember that discount ends on July 31st. Be kind. Sometimes I think kindness is the only thing that makes any sense. And being the answer to someone's prayer. Namaste.